I lay very still. I saw the nurse come up to my bed and look down at me with a bright smile. "Well now," she said, "how are we feeling, young man?" "My head hurts a little," I told her. "That's to be expected." She smiled at me. "We'll give you this pill now so you'll have a fine night's sleep." She went to the night table and filled a glass with water from a pitcher that stood on a little tray. She helped me raise my head, and I put the pill in my mouth and swallowed it down with some of the water. "Thank you," I said, lying back on the pillow. "You're very welcome, young man. It's nice to meet polite young people. Good night now." "Good night, ma'am. Thank you." She went away up the aisle. I turned my head and looked at Billy. He lay very still with his eyes open. I watched him for a moment, then closed my eye. I wondered what it was like to be blind, completely blind. I couldn't imagine it, but I thought it must be something like the way I was feeling now with my eyes closed. But it's not the same, I told myself. I know if I open my right eye, I'll see. When you're blind, it makes no difference whether you open your eyes or not. I could not imagine what it was like to know that no matter whether my eyes were opened or closed, it made no difference. Everything was still dark. Chapter 3. Asleep, I heard a shout and a noise that sounded like a cheer, and I woke immediately. There was a lot of movement in the ward, and loud voices. I wondered what was happening. There was so much noise and shouting going on, and a radio was blaring. I began to sit up, then remembered that I was not yet permitted to sit, and put my head back on the pillow. It was light outside, but I could not see the sun. I wondered what the noise was all about, and then I saw Mrs. Carpenter walking sternly up the aisle. She was telling people to stop all the shouting, and to remember that this was a hospital and not Madison Square Garden. I looked over at Billy. He was sitting straight up in his bed, and I could tell he was trying to make out what was going on. His face looked puzzled and a little frightened. I turned to look at Mr. Savo, and I saw he was not in his bed. The noise quieted a little, but the radio was still blaring. I couldn't make it out too clearly because every now and then someone would interrupt with a shout or a cheer. The announcer was talking about places called Caen and Carentan. He said something about a British airborne division seizing bridgeheads, and 2 American airborne divisions stopping enemy troops from moving into the Cotentin Peninsula. I didn't recognize any of the names, and I wondered why everyone was so excited. There was war news all the time, but no one got this excited unless something very special was happening. I thought I could see Mr. Savo sitting on one of the beds. Mrs. Carpenter went over to him, and from the way she walked, I thought she was angry. I saw Mr. Savo get to his feet and come back up the aisle. The announcer was saying something about the Isle of Wight and the Normandy coast, and Royal Air Force bombers attacking enemy coast defense guns, and United States Air Force bombers attacking shore defenses. I suddenly realized what was happening, and felt my heart begin to beat quickly. I saw Mr. Savo come up to my bed. He was angry, and his long, thin face with the black eye patch made him look like a pirate. "Go back to your bed, Mr. Savo," he mimicked. "Go back to your bed this instant. You'd think I was dying. This is no time to be in bed." "Is it the invasion of Europe, Mr. Savo?" I asked him eagerly. I was feeling excited and a little tense, and I wished the people who were cheering would be quiet. He looked down at me. "It's D-Day, Bobby boy. We're clopping 'em good, and Tony Savo has got to go back to his bed." And then he spotted the portable radio my father had brought me the night before. "Hey, Bobby boy, is that your radio?" "That's right," I said excitedly. "I forgot all about it." "Lucky, lucky us." He was smiling broadly and no longer looked like a pirate. "We'll put it on the table between our beds and give it a listen, eh?" "I think Billy will want to hear it too, Mr. Savo." I looked over at Billy. Billy turned and stared in the direction of my voice. "Do you have a radio there, Bobby?" He seemed very excited. "It's right here, Billy, right between our beds. My uncle is a pilot. He flies big planes that drop bombs. Can you turn it on?" "Sure, kid." Mr. Savo turned on the radio, found the station with the same announcer who was coming over the other radio, then got into his bed and lay back on his pillow. The 3 of us lay in our beds and listened to the news of the invasion. Mrs. Carpenter came up the aisle. She was still a little angry over all the noise in the ward, but I could see she was also excited. She asked me how I was feeling. "I'm feeling fine, ma'am." "That's very good. Is that your radio?" "Yes, ma'am. My father brought it to me." "How nice. You may sit up a little if you wish." "Thank you." I was happy to hear that. "May I pray with my tefillin?" "Your phylacteries?" "Yes, ma'am." "I don't see why not. You'll be careful of the bump on your head now." "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." She looked sternly at Mr. Savo. "I see you're behaving yourself, Mr. Savo." Mr. Sabo looked at her out of his left eye and grunted. "You'd think I was dying." "You are to remain in bed, Mr. Sabo." Mr. Sabo grunted again. She went back up the aisle. "Tough as a ring post," Mr. Sabo said, grinning. "Turn it up a bit, Bobby boy. Can't hear it too good." I leaned over and turned up the volume of the radio. It felt good to be able to move again. I got the tefillin and prayer book out of the drawer of the night table and began to put on the tefillin. The head strap rubbed against the bump, and I winced. It was still sore. I finished adjusting the hand strap and opened the prayer book. I saw Mr. Sabo looking at me. Then I remembered that I wasn't allowed to read, so I closed the prayer book. I prayed whatever I remembered by heart, trying not to listen to the announcer. I prayed for the safety of all the soldiers fighting on the beaches. When I finished praying, I took off the tefillin and put them and the prayer book back in the drawer. "You're a real religious kid there, Bobby boy," Mr. Sabo said to me. I didn't know what to say to that, so I looked at him and nodded and didn't say anything. "You going to be a priest or something?" "I might," I said. "My father wants me to be a mathematician, though." "You good at math?" "Yes, I get all A's in math." "But you want to be a priest, eh? Rabbi, you call it?" "Sometimes I think I want to be a rabbi. I'm not sure." "It's a good thing to be, Bobby boy. Cockeyed world needs people like that. I could have been a priest. Had a chance once. Made a wrong choice. Wound up clopping people instead. Lousy choice. Hey, listen to that." The correspondent was saying excitedly that some German torpedo boats had attacked a Norwegian destroyer, and that it looked like it was sinking. There were sailors jumping overboard and lifeboats being lowered. "They got clopped," Mr. Sabo said, looking grim. "Poor poor guys." The correspondent sounded very excited as he described the Norwegian destroyer's sinking. The rest of that morning I did nothing but listen to the radio and talk about the war with Mr. Sabo and Billy. I explained to Billy as best I could some of the things that were going on, and he kept telling me his uncle was the pilot of a big plane that dropped bombs. He asked me if I thought he was dropping them now to help with the invasion. I told him I was sure he was. Shortly after lunch, a boy came in from the other ward bouncing a ball. I saw he was about 6 years old, had a thin, pale face, and dark, uncombed hair, which he kept brushing away from his eyes with his left hand, while he walked along bouncing the ball with his right. He wore light brown pajamas and a dark brown robe. "Poor kid," said Mr. Sabo. "Been in the ward across the hall most of his life. Stomach's got no juices or something." He watched him come up the aisle. "Crazy world. Cockeyed." The boy stood at the foot of Mr. Sabo's bed, looking very small and pale. "Hey, Mr. Tony, you want to catch with Mickey?" Mr. Sabo told him this was no day to toss a ball around. There was an invasion going on. Mickey didn't know what an invasion was, and began to cry. "You promised, Mr. Tony. You said you would catch with little Mickey." Mr. Sabo looked uncomfortable. Okay, kid, don't start bawling again. Just 2 catches, okay?" "Sure, Mr. Tony," Mickey said, his face glowing. He threw the ball to Mr. Sabo, who had to stretch his right hand high over his head to catch it. He tossed it back lightly to the boy, who dropped it and went scrambling for it under the bed. I saw Mrs. Carpenter come rushing up the aisle looking furious. "Mr. Sabo, you are simply impossible," she almost shouted. Mr. Sabo sat in his bed, breathing very hard and not saying anything. "You are going to make yourself seriously ill unless you stop this nonsense and rest." "Yes, ma'am," Mr. Sabo said. His face was pale. He lay back on his pillow and closed his left eye. Mrs. Carpenter turned to the boy, who had found his ball and was looking expectantly at Mr. Sabo. "Mickey, there will be no more catching with Mr. Sabo." "Aw, Mrs. Carpenter." "Mickey?" "Yes'm," Mickey said, suddenly docile. "Thanks for the catch, Mr. Tony." Mr. Sabo lay on his pillow and didn't say anything. Mickey went back up the aisle, bouncing his ball. Mrs. Carpenter looked down at Mr. Sabo. "Are you feeling all right?" she asked, sounding concerned. "I'm a little pooped," Mr. Sabo said, not opening his eye. "You should know better than to do something like that." "Sorry, ma'am." Mrs. Carpenter went away. "Tough as a ring post," Mr. Sabo said, "but a big heart." He lay still with his eye closed, and after a while I saw he was asleep. The announcer was talking about the supply problems involved in a large-scale invasion when I saw Mr. Gallanter coming up the aisle. I turned the radio down a little. Mr. Gallanter came up to my bed. He was carrying a copy of the New York Times under his arm, and his face was flushed and excited. "Came up to say hello, soldier. I'm between schools, so I've only got a few minutes. Couldn't see you otherwise today. How are we doing?" "I'm a lot better, Mr. Gallagher." I was happy and proud that he had come to see me. "My head doesn't hurt at all, and the wrist is a lot less sore." "That's good news, Trooper. Great news. This is some day, isn't it? One of the greatest days in history. Fantastic undertaking." "Yes, sir. I've been listening to it on the radio." "We can't begin to imagine what's going on, Trooper. That's the incredible part. Probably have to land more than 150,000 troops today and tomorrow, and thousands of tanks, artillery pieces, jeeps, bulldozers, everything, and all on those beaches. It staggers the mind. I told little Billy here that they were using the big bombing planes an awful lot. His uncle's a bomber pilot. He's probably flying his plane right now." Mr. Gallagher looked at Billy, who had turned his head in our direction. I saw Mr. Gallagher notice immediately that he was blind. "How are you, young feller?" Mr. Gallagher said, his voice sounding suddenly a lot less excited. "My uncle flies a big plane that drops bombs," Billy said. "Are you a flyer?" I saw Mr. Gallagher's face go tight. "Mr. Gallagher is my gym teacher in high school," I told Billy. "My uncle's been a pilot for a long time now. My father says they have to fly an awful lot before they can come home. Were you wounded or something, Mr. Gallagher, sir, that you're home now?" I saw Mr. Gallagher stare at the boy. His mouth was open, and he ran his tongue over his lips. He looked uncomfortable. "Couldn't make it as a soldier," he said, looking at Billy. "I've got a bad—" He stopped. "Tried to make it, but couldn't." "I'm sorry to hear that, sir." "Yeah," Mr. Gallagher said. I was feeling embarrassed. Mr. Gallagher's excitement had disappeared, and now he stood there, staring at Billy and looking deflated. I felt sorry for him, and I regretted having mentioned Billy's uncle. "I wish your uncle all the luck in the world," Mr. Gallagher said quietly to Billy. "Thank you, sir," Billy said. Mr. Gallagher turned to me. "They did quite a job getting that piece of glass out of your eye, Trooper." He was trying to sound cheerful, but he wasn't succeeding too well. "How soon will you be out?" "My father said in a few days." "Well, that's great. You're a lucky boy. It could have been a lot worse." "Yes, sir." I wondered if he knew about the scar tissue and didn't want to talk to me about it. I decided not to mention it. He was looking a little sad and uneasy, and I didn't want to make him any more uncomfortable than he already was. "Well, I've got to go teach class, Trooper. Take care of yourself, and get out of here soon." "Yes, sir. Thank you for everything and for coming to see me." "Anything for one of my troopers," he said. I watched him walk away slowly up the aisle. "It's too bad he couldn't be a soldier," Billy said. "My father isn't a soldier, but that's because my mother was killed in the accident, and there's no one else to take care of me and my little sister." I looked at him and didn't say anything. "I think I'll sleep a little now," Billy said. "Would you turn off the radio?" "Sure, Billy." I saw him put his palms under his head on the pillow and lie there, staring vacantly up at the ceiling. I lay back, and after a few minutes of thinking about Mr. Gallagher, I fell asleep. I dreamed about my left eye and felt very frightened. I thought I could see sunlight through the closed lid of my right eye, and I dreamed about waking up in the hospital yesterday afternoon and the nurse moving the curtain away. And now something was blocking the sunlight. Then the sunlight was back again, and I could see it in my sleep through the lid of my right eye. Then it was gone again, and I felt myself getting a little angry at whoever was playing with the sunlight. I opened my eye and saw someone standing alongside my bed. Whoever it was stood silhouetted against the sunlight, and for a moment I couldn't make out the face. Then I sat up quickly. "Hello," Danny Saunders said softly. "Sorry if I woke you. The nurse told me it was all right to wait here." I looked at him in amazement. He was the last person in the world I had expected to visit me in the hospital. "Before you tell me how much you hate me," he said quietly, "let me tell you that I'm sorry about what happened." I stared at him and didn't know what to say. He was wearing a dark suit, a white shirt open at the collar, and a dark skull cap. I could see the earlocks hanging down alongside his sculptured face, and the fringes outside his trousers below the jacket. "Well, I don't hate you," I managed to say, because I thought it was time for me to say something, even if what I said was a lie. He smiled sadly. "Can I sit down? I've been standing here about 15 minutes waiting for you to wake up." I sort of nodded or did something with my head, and he took it as a sign of approval, and sat down on the edge of the bed to my right. The sun streamed in from the windows behind him, and shadows lay over his face and accentuated the lines of his cheeks and jaw. I thought he looked a little like the pictures I had seen of Abraham Lincoln before he grew the beard, except for the small tufts of sand-colored hair on his chin and cheeks, the close-cropped hair on his head, and the side curls. He seemed ill at ease, and his eyes blinked nervously. "What do they say about the scar tissue?" he asked. I was astonished all over again. "How did you find out about that?" "I called your father last night. He told me." "They don't know anything about it yet. I might be blind in that eye." He nodded slowly and was silent. "How does it feel to know you've made someone blind in one eye?" I asked him. I had recovered from my surprise at his presence, and was feeling the anger beginning to come back. He looked at me, his sculptured face expressionless. "What do you want me to say?" His voice wasn't angry. It was sad. "You want me to say I'm miserable? Okay, I'm miserable." "That's all? Only miserable? How do you sleep nights?" He looked down at his hands. "I didn't come here to fight with you," he said softly. "If you want to do nothing but fight, I'm going to go home." "For my part," I told him, "you can go to hell and take your whole snooty bunch of Hasidim along with you." He looked at me and sat still. He didn't seem angry, just sad. His silence made me all the angrier, and finally I said, "What the hell are you sitting there for? I thought you said you were going home." "I came to talk to you," he said quietly. "Well, I don't want to listen," I told him. "Why don't you go home? Go home and be sorry over my eye." He stood up slowly. I could barely see his face because of the sunlight behind him. His shoulders seemed bowed. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I'll just bet you are," I told him. He started to say something, stopped, then turned and walked slowly away up the aisle. I lay back on the pillow, trembling a little and frightened over my own anger and hate. "He a friend of yours?" I heard Mr. Savo ask me. I turned to him. He was lying with his head on his pillow. "No," I said. "He give you a rough time or something? You don't sound so good, Bobby boy." "He's the one who hit me in the eye with the ball." Mr. Savo's face brightened. "No kiddin'. The clopper himself. Well, well." "I think I'll get some sleep," I said. I was feeling depressed. "He one of those real religious Jews?" Mr. Savo asked. "Yes." "Yeah, I've seen him around. My manager had an uncle like that. Real religious guy. Fanatic. Never had anything to do with my manager, though. Small loss. Some lousy manager." I didn't feel like having a conversation just then, so I remained silent. I was feeling a little regretful that I had been so angry with Danny Saunders. I saw Mr. Savo sit up and take the deck of cards from his night table. He began to set up his rows on the blanket. I noticed Billy was asleep. I lay back in my bed and closed my eyes, but I couldn't sleep. My father came in a few minutes after supper, looking pale and worn. When I told him about my conversation with Danny Saunders, his eyes became angry behind the glasses. "You did a foolish thing, Reuven," he told me sternly. "You remember what the Talmud says. If a person comes to apologize for having hurt you, you must listen and forgive him." "I couldn't help it, Abba." "You hate him so much you could say those things to him?" "I'm sorry," I said, feeling miserable. He looked at me, and I saw his eyes were suddenly sad. "I did not intend to scold you," he said. "You weren't scolding," I defended him. "What I tried to tell you, Reuven, is that when a person comes to talk to you, you should be patient and listen, especially if he has hurt you in any way. Now, we will not talk any more tonight about Reb Saunders' son. This is an important day in the history of the world. It is the beginning of the end for Hitler and his madmen. Did you hear the announcer on the boat describing the invasion?" We talked for a while about the invasion. Finally, my father left, and I lay back in my bed, feeling depressed and angry with myself over what I had said to Danny Saunders. Billy's father had come to see him again, and they were talking quietly. He glanced at me and smiled warmly. He was a fine-looking person, and I noticed he had a long white scar on his forehead, running parallel to the line of his light blonde hair. "Billy tells me you've been very nice to him," he said to me. I sort of nodded my head on the pillow and tried to smile back. "I appreciate that very much," he said. "Billy wonders if you would call us when he gets out of the hospital." "Sure," I said. "We're in the phone book. Roger Merritt. Billy says that after his operation, when he can see again, he would like to see what you look like." "Sure, I'll give you a call," I said. "Did you hear that, Billy?" "Yes," Billy said happily. "Didn't I tell you he was nice, Daddy?" The man smiled at me, then turned back to Billy. They went on talking quietly. I lay in the bed and thought about all the things that had happened during the day, and felt sad and depressed. The next morning, Mrs. Carpenter told me I could get out of bed and walk around a bit. After breakfast, I went out into the hall for a while. I looked out a window and saw people outside in the street. I stood there, staring out the window a long time. Then I went back to my bed and lay down. I saw Mr. Savo sitting up in his bed, playing cards and grinning. "How's it feel to be on your feet, Bobby boy?" he asked me. "Feels wonderful. I'm a little tired, though." "Take it real slow, kid. Takes a while to get the old strength back." One of the patients near the radio at the other end of the ward let out a shout. I leaned over and turned on my radio. The announcer was talking about a breakthrough on one of the beaches. "That's clopping 'em," Mr. Savo said, grinning broadly. I wondered what that beach must look like now, and I could see it filled with broken vehicles and dead soldiers. I spent the morning listening to the radio. When Mrs. Carpenter came over, I asked her how long I would be in the hospital, and she smiled and said Dr. Sneidman would have to decide that. "Dr. Sneidman will see you Friday morning," she added. I was beginning to feel a lot less excited over the war news, and a lot more annoyed that I couldn't read. In the afternoon, I listened to some of the soap operas. Life Can Be Beautiful, Stella Dallas, Mary Noble, Ma Perkins, and what I heard depressed me even more. I decided to turn off the radio and get some sleep. "Do you want to hear any more of this?" I asked Billy. He didn't answer, and I saw he was sleeping. "Turn it off, kid," Mr. Savo said. "How much of that junk can a guy take?" I turned off the radio and lay back on my pillow. "Never knew people who could get clopped so hard the way they clop 'em on those soap operas," Mr. Savo said. "Well, well, look who's here." "Who?" I sat up. "Your real religious clopper." I saw it was Danny Saunders. He came up the aisle and stood alongside my bed, wearing the same clothes he had the day before. "Are you going to get angry at me again?" he asked hesitantly. "No," I said. "Can I sit down?" "Yes." "Thanks," he said, and sat down on the edge of the bed to my right. I saw Mr. Savo stare at him a moment, then go back to his cards. "You were pretty rotten yesterday, you know," Danny Saunders said. "I'm sorry about that." I was surprised at how happy I was to see him. "I didn't so much mind you being angry," he said. "What I thought was rotten was the way you wouldn't let me talk." "That was rotten, all right. I'm really sorry. I came up to talk to you now. Do you want to listen?" "Sure," I said. "I've been thinking about that ball game. I haven't stopped thinking about it since you got hit." "I've been thinking about it, too," I said. "Whenever I do or see something I don't understand, I like to think about it until I understand it." He talked very rapidly, and I could see he was tense. I've thought about it a lot, but I still don't understand it. I want to talk to you about it, okay?" "Sure," I said. "Do you know what I don't understand about that ball game? I don't understand why I wanted to kill you." I stared at him. "It's really bothering me." "Well, I should hope so," I said. "Don't be so cute, Malter. I'm not being melodramatic. I really wanted to kill you." "Well, it was a pretty hot ball game," I said. "I didn't exactly love you myself there for a while." "I don't think you even know what I'm talking about," he said. "Now, wait a minute. No, listen. Just listen to what I'm saying, will you? Do you remember that second curve you threw me?" "Yeah." "Do you remember I stood in front of the plate afterwards and looked at you?" "Sure." I remembered the idiot grin vividly. "Well, that's when I wanted to walk over to you and open your head with my bat." I didn't know what to say. "I don't know why I didn't. I wanted to." "That was some ball game," I said, a little awed by what he was telling me. "It had nothing to do with the ball game," he said. "At least I don't think it did. You weren't the first rough team we played, and we've lost before, too. But you really had me going, Malter. I can't figure it out. Anyway, I feel better telling you about it." "Please stop calling me Malter," I said. He looked at me. Then he smiled faintly. "What do you want me to call you?" "If you're going to call me anything, call me Reuven," I said. "Malter sounds as if you're a school teacher or something." "Okay," he said, smiling again. "Then you call me Danny." "Fine," I said. "It was the wildest feeling," he said. "I've never felt that way before." I looked at him, and suddenly I had the feeling that everything around me was out of focus. There was Danny Saunders, sitting on my bed in the hospital, dressed in his Hasidic-style clothes, and talking about wanting to kill me because I had pitched him some curved balls. He was dressed like a Hasid, but he didn't sound like one. Also, yesterday I had hated him. Now we were calling each other by our first names. I sat and listened to him talk. I was fascinated just listening to the way perfect English came out of a person in the clothes of a Hasid. I'd always thought their English was tinged with a Yiddish accent. As a matter of fact, the few times I had ever talked with a Hasid, he had spoken only in Yiddish. And here was Danny Saunders talking English, and what he was saying, and the way he was saying it, just didn't seem to fit in with the way he was dressed, with the side curls on his face and the fringes hanging down below his dark jacket. "You're a pretty rough fielder and pitcher," he said, smiling at me a little. "You're pretty rough yourself," I told him. "Where did you learn to hit a ball like that?" "I practiced," he said. "You don't know how many hours I spent learning how to field and hit a baseball." "Where do you get the time? I thought you people always studied Talmud." He grinned at me. "I have an agreement with my father. I study my quota of Talmud every day, and he doesn't care what I do the rest of the time." "What's your quota of Talmud?" "2 blat." "2 blat?" I stared at him. That was 4 pages of Talmud a day. If I did 1 page a day, I was delighted. "Don't you have any English work at all?" "Of course I do, but not too much. We don't have too much English work at our yeshiva." "Everybody has to do 2 blat of Talmud a day and is English?" "Not everybody. Only me. My father wants it that way." "How do you do it? That's a fantastic amount of work." "I'm lucky," he grinned at me. "I'll show you how. What Talmud are you studying now?" "Kiddushin," I said. "What page are you on?" I told him. "I studied that 2 years ago. Is this what it reads like?" He recited about a third of the page, word for word, including the commentaries and the Maimonidean legal decisions of the Talmudic disputations. He did it coldly, mechanically, and listening to him, I had the feeling I was watching some sort of human machine at work. I sat there and gaped at him. "Say, that's pretty good," I managed to say finally. "I have a photographic mind. My father said it's a gift from God. I look at a page of Talmud, and I remember it by heart. I understand it, too. After a while, it gets a little boring, though. They repeat themselves a lot. I can do it with Ivanhoe, too. Have you read Ivanhoe?" "Sure." "You want to hear it with Ivanhoe?" "You're showing off now," I said. He grinned. "I'm trying to make a good impression." "I'm impressed," I said. "I have to sweat to memorize a page of Talmud. Are you going to be a rabbi?" "Sure. I'm going to take my father's place." "I may become a rabbi. Not a Hasidic type, though." He looked at me, an expression of surprise on his face. "What do you want to become a rabbi for?" "Why not? There are so many other things you could be." "That's a funny way for you to talk. You're going to become a rabbi." "I have no choice. It's an inherited position." "You mean you wouldn't become a rabbi if you had a choice?" "I don't think so." "What would you be?" "I don't know. Probably a psychologist." "A psychologist?" He nodded. "I'm not even sure I know what it's about." "It helps you understand what a person is really like inside. I have read some books on it." "Is that like Freud and psychoanalysis and things like that?" "Yes," he said. I didn't know much at all about psychoanalysis, but Danny Saunders, in his Hasidic clothes, seemed to me to be about the last person in the world who would qualify as an analyst. I always pictured analysts as sophisticated people with short-pointed beards, monocles, and German accents. "What would you be if you didn't become a rabbi?" Danny Saunders asked. "A mathematician," I said. "That's what my father wants me to be." "And teach in a university somewhere?" "Yes." "That's a very nice thing to be," he said. His blue eyes looked dreamy for a moment. "I'd like that." "I'm not sure I want to do that, though." "Why not?" "I sort of feel I could be more useful to people as a rabbi. To our own people, I mean. You know, not everyone is religious like you or me. I could teach them and help them when they're in trouble. I think I would get a lot of pleasure out of that." "I don't think I would. Anyway, I'm going to be a rabbi. Say, where did you learn to pitch like that?" "I practiced, too." I grinned at him. "But you don't have to do 2 blat of Talmud a day." "Thank God." "You certainly have a mean way of pitching." "How about your hitting? Do you always hit like that, straight to the pitcher?" "Yes." "How'd you ever learn to do that?" "I can't hit any other way. It's got something to do with my eyesight and the way I hold the bat. I don't know." "That's a pretty murderous way to hit a ball. You almost killed me." "You were supposed to duck," he said. "I had no chance to duck." "Yes, you did." "There wasn't enough time. You hit it so fast." "There was time for you to bring up your glove." I considered that for a moment. "You didn't want to duck." That's right, I said after a while. You didn't want to have to duck any ball that I hit. You had to try and stop it. That's right. I remembered that fraction of a second when I had brought my glove up in front of my face. I could have jumped aside and avoided the ball completely. I hadn't thought to do that, though. I hadn't wanted Danny Saunders to make me look like Schwartzy. Well, you stopped it, Danny Saunders said. I grinned at him. No hard feelings any more? He asked me. No hard feelings, I said. I just hope the eye heals all right. I hope so, too, he said fervently. Believe me. Say, who was that rabbi on the bench? Is he a coach or something? Danny Saunders laughed. He's one of the teachers in the yeshiva. My father sends him along to make sure we don't mix too much with the apikorsim. That apikorsim thing really got me angry at you. What'd you have to tell your team a thing like that for? I'm sorry about that. It's the only way we could have a team. I sort of convinced my father you were the best team around and that we had a duty to beat you apikorsim at what you were best at. Something like that. You really had to tell your father that? Yes. What would have happened if you'd lost? I don't like to think about that. You don't know my father. So you practically had to beat us. He looked at me for a moment, and I saw he was thinking of something. His eyes had a kind of cold, glassy look. That's right, he said finally. He seemed to be seeing something he had been searching for a long time. That's right, he said again. What was he reading all the time? Who? The rabbi. I don't know. Probably a book on Jewish law or something. I thought it might have been something your father wrote. My father doesn't write, Danny said. He reads a lot, but he never writes. He says that words distort what a person really feels in his heart. He doesn't like to talk too much either. Oh, he talks plenty when we're studying Talmud together, but otherwise he doesn't say much. He told me once he wishes everyone could talk in silence. Talk in silence? I don't understand it either, Danny said, shrugging. But that's what he said. Your father must be quite a man. He looked at me. Yes, he said, with the same cold, glassy stare in his eyes. I saw him begin to play absent-mindedly with one of his earlocks. We were quiet for a long time. He seemed absorbed in something. Finally, he stood up. It's late. I'd better go. Thanks for coming to see me. I'll see you tomorrow again. Sure. He still seemed to be absorbed in something. I watched him walk slowly up the aisle and out of the ward. Chapter 4. My father came in a few minutes later, looking worse than he had the day before. His cheeks were sunken, his eyes were red, and his face was ashen. He coughed a great deal and kept telling me it was his cold. He sat down on the bed and told me he had talked to Dr. Sneidman on the phone. He will look at your eye Friday morning, and you will probably be able to come home Friday afternoon. I will come to pick you up when I'm through teaching. That's wonderful, I said. You will not be able to read for about 10 days. He told me he will know by then about the scar tissue. I'll be happy to be out of this hospital, I said. I walked around a little today and saw the people on the street outside. My father looked at me and didn't say anything. I wish I was outside now, I said. I envy them being able to walk around like that. They don't know how lucky they are. No one knows he is fortunate until he becomes unfortunate, my father said quietly. That's the way the world is. It'll be good to be home again. At least I won't have to spend a Shabbat here. We'll have a nice Shabbat together, my father said. A quiet Shabbat, where we can talk and not be disturbed. We will sit and drink tea and talk. He coughed a little and put the handkerchief to his mouth. He took off his spectacles and wiped his eyes. Then he put them back on and sat on the bed looking at me. He seemed so tired and pale, as if all his strength had been drained from him. I didn't tell you yet, Abba. Danny Saunders came to see me today. My father did not seem surprised. Ah, he said. And? He's a very nice person. I like him. So, all of a sudden you like him? He was smiling. What did he say? I told him everything I could remember of my conversation with Danny Saunders. Once, as I talked, he began to cough, and I stopped and watched helplessly as his thin frame bent and shook. Then he wiped his lips and eyes and told me to continue. He listened intently. When I told him that Danny Saunders had wanted to kill me, his eyes went wide, but he didn't interrupt. When I told him about Danny Saunders' photographic mind, he nodded, as if he had known about that all along. When I described, as best I could, what we had said about our careers, he smiled indulgently. And when I explained why Danny Saunders had told his team that they would kill us epicorsim, he stared at me, and I could see the same look of absorption come into his eyes that I had seen earlier in the eyes of Danny Saunders. Then my father nodded. "People are not always what they seem to be," he said softly. "That is the way the world is, Reuben." "He's going to come visit me again tomorrow, Abba." "Ah," my father murmured. He was silent for a moment. Then he said quietly, "Reuben, listen to me. The Talmud says that a person should do two things for himself. One is to acquire a teacher. Do you remember the other?" "Choose a friend?" I said. "Yes. You know what a friend is, Reuben? A Greek philosopher said that two people who are true friends are like two bodies with one soul." I nodded. "Reuben, if you can, make Danny Saunders your friend." "I like him a lot, Abba." "No, listen to me. I'm not talking only about liking him. I'm telling you to make him your friend, and let him make you his friend. I think—" He stopped and broke into another cough. He coughed a long time. Then he sat quietly on the bed, his hand on his chest, breathing hard. "Make him your friend," he said again, and cleared his throat noisily. "Even though he's a Hasid?" I asked, smiling. "Make him your friend," my father repeated. "We will see." "The way he acts and talks doesn't seem to fit what he wears and the way he looks," I said. "It's like two different people." My father nodded slowly but was silent. He looked over at Billy, who was still asleep. "How is your little neighbor?" he asked me. "He's very nice. There's a new kind of operation they'll be doing on his eyes. He was in an auto accident, and his mother was killed." My father looked at Billy and shook his head. He sighed and stood up, then bent and kissed me on the forehead. "I will be back to see you tomorrow. Is there anything you need?" "No, Abba." "Are you able to use your tefillin?" "Yes. I can't read, though. I pray by heart." He smiled at me. "I did not think of that. My baseball player. I will see you again tomorrow, Reuben." "Yes, Abba." I watched him walk quickly up the aisle. "That's your father, kid?" I heard Mr. Savo ask me. I turned to him and nodded. He was still playing his game of cards. "Nice-looking man. Very dignified. What's he do?" "He teaches." "Yeah? Well, that's real nice, kid. My old man worked a pushcart. Down near Norfolk Street it was. Worked like a dog. You're a lucky kid. What's he teach?" "Talmud," I said. "Jewish law." "No kiddin'. He in a Jewish school?" "Yes," I said. "A high school." Mr. Savo frowned at a card he had just pulled from the deck. "Damn," he muttered. "No luck nowhere. Story of my life." He tucked the card into a row on the blanket. "You look kind of chummy there with your clopper, boy. You making friends with him?" "He's a nice person," I said. "Yeah? Well, you watch guys like that, kid. You watch him real good, you hear? Anyone clops you, he's got a thing going. Old Tony knows. You watch him." "It was really an accident," I said. "Yeah? I could have ducked the ball." Mr. Savo looked at me. His face was dark with the growth of beard, and his left eye seemed a little swollen and bloodshot. The black patch that covered his right eye looked like a huge skin mole. "Anyone out to clop you doesn't want you to duck, kid. I know." "It wasn't really like that, Mr. Savo." "Sure, kid, sure. Old Tony doesn't like fanatics, that's all." "I don't think he's a fanatic." "No? What's he go around in those clothes for?" "They all wear those clothes. It's part of their religion." "Sure, kid. But listen, you're a good kid, so I'm telling you, watch out for those fanatics. They're the worst cloppers around." He looked at a card in his hands, then threw it down. "Lousy game, no luck." He scooped up the cards, patted them into a deck, and put them on the night table. He lay back on his pillow. "Long day," he said, talking almost to himself. "Like waiting for a big fight." He closed his left eye. I woke during the night and lay still a long time, trying to remember where I was. I saw the dim blue nightlight at the other end of the ward, and took a deep breath. I heard a movement next to me and turned my head. The curtain had been drawn around Mr. Savo's bed, and I could hear people moving around. I sat up. A nurse came over to me from somewhere. "You go right back to sleep, young man," she ordered. "Do you hear?" She seemed angry and tense. I lay back on my bed. In a little while I was asleep. When I woke in the morning, the curtain was still drawn around Mr. Savo's bed. I stared at it. It was light brown, and it enclosed the area of the bed completely, so that not even the metal legs of the bed could be seen. I remembered Monday afternoon when I had awakened with the curtain around my bed, and Mrs. Carpenter bending over me, and I wondered what had happened to Mr. Savo. I saw Mrs. Carpenter coming quickly up the aisle, carrying a metal tray in her hands. There were instruments and bandages on the tray. I sat up and asked her what was wrong with Mr. Savo. She looked at me sternly, her round, fleshy face grim. "Mr. Savo will be all right, young man. Now you just go about your own business and let Mr. Savo be." She disappeared behind the curtain. I heard a soft moan. At the other end of the ward, the radio had been turned on, and the announcer was talking about the war. I didn't want to turn on my radio for fear of disturbing Mr. Savo. I heard another moan, and then I couldn't stand it anymore. I got out of my bed and went to the bathroom. Then I walked around in the hall outside the ward and stared at the people on the street. When I came back, the curtain was still drawn around Mr. Savo's bed, and Billy was awake. I sat down on my bed and saw him turn his head in my direction. "Is that you, Bobby?" he asked me. "Sure," I said. "Is something wrong with Mr. Savo?" I wondered how he knew about that. "I think so," I told him. "They've got the curtain around his bed, and Mrs. Carpenter is in there with him." "No," Billy said. "She just went away. I was calling him, and she told me not to disturb him. Is it something very bad?" "I don't know. I think we ought to talk a little quieter, Billy, so we won't bother him." "That's right," Billy said, lowering his voice. "Also, I think we'll stop listening to the radio today. We don't want to wake him if he's sleeping." Billy nodded fervently. I got my tefillin from the night table and sat on my bed and prayed for a long time. Mostly I prayed for Mr. Savo. I was eating breakfast when I saw Dr. Sneidman hurrying up the aisle with Mrs. Carpenter. He didn't even notice me as he passed my bed. He was wearing a dark suit, and he wasn't smiling. He went behind the curtain around Mr. Savo's bed, and Mrs. Carpenter followed. I heard them talking softly, and I heard Mr. Savo moan a few times. They were there quite a while. Then they came out and went back up the aisle. I was really frightened now about Mr. Savo. I found I missed him and the way he talked and played cards. After breakfast, I lay in my bed and began to think about my left eye. I remembered tomorrow was Friday, and that in the morning Dr. Sneidman was supposed to examine it. I felt cold with fright. That whole morning and afternoon I lay in the bed and thought about my eye, and became more and more frightened. All that day, the curtain remained around Mr. Savo's bed. Every few minutes, a nurse would go behind the curtain, stay there for a while, then come out and walk back up the aisle. In the afternoon, the radio at the other end of the ward was turned off. I tried to fall asleep, but couldn't. I kept watching nurses go in and out of the curtain around Mr. Savo's bed. By supper time, I was feeling so frightened and miserable that I could hardly eat. I nibbled at the food and sent the tray back almost untouched. Then I saw Danny come up the aisle and stop at my bed. He was wearing the dark suit, the dark skullcap, the white shirt open at the collar, and the fringes showing below his jacket. My face must have mirrored my happiness at seeing him, because he broke into a warm smile and said, "You look like I'm the Messiah. I must have made some impression yesterday." I grinned at him. "It's just good to see you," I told him. "How are you?" "How are you? You're the one in the hospital." "I'm fed up being cooped up like this. I want to get out and go home. Say, it's really good to see you son of a gun." He laughed. "I must be the Messiah. No mere Hasid would get a greeting like that from an Epikuros." He stood at the foot of the bed, his hands in his trouser pockets, his face relaxed. "When do you go home?" he asked. I told him. Then I remembered Mr. Savo lying in his bed behind the curtain. "Listen," I said, motioning with my head at the curtain. "Let's talk outside in the hall. I don't want to disturb him." "Listen," I said, motioning with my head at the curtain. "Let's talk outside in the hall. I don't want to disturb him." I got out of bed, put on my bathrobe, and we walked together out of the ward. We sat down on a bench in the hallway next to a window. The hallway was long and wide. Nurses, doctors, patients, orderlies, and visitors went in and out of the wards. It was still light outside. Danny put his hands in his pockets and stared out the window. "I was born in this hospital," he said quietly. "The day before yesterday was the first time I'd been in it since I was born." "I was born here, too," I said. "It never occurred to me. I thought of it yesterday in the elevator coming up. I was back here to have my tonsils out, though. Didn't you ever have your tonsils out? No, they never bothered me. He sat there with his hands in his pockets, staring out the window. Look at that. Look at all those people. They look like ants. Sometimes I get the feeling that's all we are, ants. Do you ever feel that way? His voice was quiet, and there was an edge of sadness to it. Sometimes, I said. I told it to my father once. What did he say? He didn't say anything. I told you, he never talks to me except when we study. But a few days later, while we were studying, he said that man was created by God, and Jews had a mission in life. What mission is that? To obey God? Don't you believe that? He looked slowly away from the window. I saw his deep blue eyes stare at me, then blink a few times. Sure, I believe it, he said quietly. His shoulders were bowed. Sometimes I'm not sure I know what God wants, though. It's a funny thing for you to say. Isn't it? He said. He looked at me, but didn't seem to be seeing me at all. I've never said that to anyone before. He seemed to be in a strange, brooding mood. I was beginning to feel uneasy. I read a lot, he said. I read about 7 or 8 books a week outside of my schoolwork. Have you ever read Darwin or Huxley? I've read a little of Darwin, I said. I read in the library, so my father won't know. He's very strict about what I read. You read books about evolution and things like that? I read anything good that I can get my hands on. I'm reading Hemingway now. You've heard of Hemingway? Sure. Have you read any of his works? I read some of his short stories. I finished A Farewell to Arms last week. He's a great writer. It's about the First World War. There's this American in the Italian army. He marries an English nurse, only he doesn't really marry her. They live together, and she becomes pregnant, and he deserts. They run away to Switzerland, and she dies in childbirth. I didn't read it. He's a great writer, but you wonder about a lot of things when you read him. He's got a passage in the book about ants on a burning log. The hero, this American, is watching the ants, and instead of taking the log out of the fire and saving the ants, he throws water into the fire. The water turns into steam, and that roasts some more of the ants, and the others just burn to death on the log or fall off into the fire. It's a great passage. It shows how cruel people can be. All the time he talked, he kept staring out the window. I almost had the feeling he wasn't talking so much to me as to himself. I just get so tired of studying only Talmud all the time. I know the stuff cold, and it gets a little boring after a while, so I read whatever I can get my hands on. But I only read what the librarian says is worthwhile. I met a man there, and he keeps suggesting books for me to read. That librarian is funny. She's a nice person, but she keeps staring at me all the time. She's probably wondering what a person like me is doing reading all those books. I'm wondering a little myself, I said. I told you, I get bored studying just Talmud, and the English work in school isn't too exciting. I think the English teachers are afraid of my father. They're afraid they'll lose their jobs if they say something too exciting or challenging. I don't know, but it's exciting being able to read all those books. He began to play with the earlock on the right side of his face. He rubbed it gently with his right hand, twirled it around his forefinger, released it, then twirled it around the finger again. I've never told this to anyone before, he said. All the time I kept wondering who I would tell it to one day. He was staring down at the floor. Then he looked at me and smiled. It was a sad smile, but it seemed to break the mood he was in. If you'd have ducked that ball, I would still be wondering, he said, and he put his hand back into his pockets. I didn't say anything. I was still a little overwhelmed by what he had told me. I couldn't get over the fact that this was Danny Saunders, the son of Reb Saunders, the tzaddik. Can I be honest with you? I asked him. Sure, he said. I'm all mixed up about you. I'm not trying to be funny or anything. I really am mixed up about you. You look like a Hasid, but you don't sound like one. You don't sound like what my father says Hasidim are supposed to sound like. You sound almost as if you don't believe in God. He looked at me, but didn't respond. Are you really going to become a rabbi and take your father's place? Yes, he said quietly. How can you do that if you don't believe in God? I believe in God. I never said I didn't believe in God. You don't sound like a Hasid, though, I told him. What do I sound like? Like an apikoros. He smiled, but said nothing. It was a sad smile, and his blue eyes seemed sad, too. He looked back out the window, and we sat in silence a long time. It was a warm silence, though, not in the least bit awkward. Finally, he said very quietly, "I have to take my father's place. I have no choice. It's an inherited position. I'll work it out, somehow. It won't be that bad, being a rabbi. Once I'm a rabbi, my people won't care what I read. I'll be sort of like God to them. They won't ask any questions." "Are you going to like being a rabbi?" "No," he said. "How can you spend your life doing what you don't like?" "I have no choice," he said again. "It's like a dynasty. If the son doesn't take the father's place, the dynasty falls apart. The people expect me to become their rabbi. My family has been their rabbi for 6 generations now. I can't just walk out on them. I'm a little trapped. I'll work it out, though, somehow." But he didn't sound as if he thought he would be able to work it out. He sounded very sad. We sat quietly a while longer, looking out the window at the people below. There were only a few minutes of sunlight left, and I found myself wondering why my father hadn't yet come to see me. Danny turned away from the window and began to play with his earlock again, caressing it and twirling it around his index finger. Then he shook his head and put his hands in his pockets. He sat back on the bench and looked at me. "It's funny," he said. "It's really funny. I have to be a rabbi, and I don't want to be one. You don't have to be a rabbi, and you do want to be one. It's a crazy world." I didn't say anything. I had a sudden vivid picture of Mr. Savo sitting in his bed, saying, "Crazy world," cockeyed. I wondered how he was feeling, and if the curtain was still around his bed. "What kind of mathematics are you interested in?" Danny asked. "I'm really interested in logic, mathematical logic." He looked puzzled. "Some people call it symbolic logic," I said. "I've never even heard of it," he confessed. "It's really very new. A lot of it began with Russell and Whitehead, and a book they wrote called Principia Mathematica." "Bertrand Russell?" "That's right." "I didn't know he was a mathematician." "Oh, sure. He's a great mathematician, and a logician, too." "I'm very bad at mathematics." "What's it all about? Mathematical logic, I mean." "Well, they try to deduce all of mathematics from simple logical principles and show that mathematics is really based on logic. It's pretty complicated stuff, but I enjoy it." "You have a course in that in your high school?" "No, you're not the only person who reads a lot." For a moment he looked at me in astonishment. Then he laughed. "I don't read 7 or 8 books a week, though, like you," I said. "Only about 3 or 4. He laughed again. Then he got to his feet and stood facing me. His eyes were bright and alive with excitement. "I never even heard of symbolic logic," he said. "It sounds fascinating. And you want to be a rabbi. How do they do it? I mean, how can you deduce arithmetic from logic? I don't see—" He stopped and looked at me. "What's the matter?" he asked. "There's my father," I said, and got quickly to my feet. My father had come out of the elevator at the other end of the hall and was walking toward the eye ward. I thought I would have to call out to attract his attention, but a few steps short of the entrance to the ward, he saw us. If he felt any surprise at seeing me with Danny, I didn't notice it. His face did not change expression. But as he came over to us, I saw Danny's face change radically. It went from curiosity to bewildered astonishment. He looked for a moment as though he wanted to run away. I could see he was nervous and agitated, but I didn't have time to think about it, because my father was standing there, looking at the two of us. He was wearing his dark gray double-breasted suit and his gray hat. He was a good deal shorter than Danny, and a little shorter than I, and his face still looked pale and worn. He seemed out of breath, and he was carrying a handkerchief in his right hand. "I am late," he said. "I was afraid they would not let me in." His voice was hoarse and raspy. "There was a faculty meeting. How are you, Reuven?" "I'm fine, Abba." "Should you be out here in the hall now?" "It's all right, Abba. The man next to me became sick suddenly, and we didn't want to disturb him. Abba, I want you to meet Danny Saunders." I could see a faint smile begin to play around the corners of my father's lips. He nodded at Danny. "This is my father, Danny." Danny didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at my father. I saw my father watching him from behind his steel-rimmed spectacles, the smile still playing around the corners of his lips. "I didn't," Danny began, then stopped. There was a long moment of silence, during which Danny and my father stood looking at each other, and I stared at the two of them, and nothing was said. It was my father who finally broke the silence. He did it gently and with quiet warmth. He said, I see you play ball as well as you read books, Danny. I hope you are not as violent with a book as you are with a baseball. Now it was my turn to be astonished. You know Danny? In a way, my father said, smiling broadly. I had no idea, Danny stammered. And how could you have? My father asked. I never told you my name. You knew me all the time? Only after the second week. I asked the librarian. You applied for a membership once, but did not take out a card. I was afraid to. I understood as much, my father said. I suddenly realized it was my father who all along had been suggesting books for Danny to read. My father was the man Danny had been meeting in the library. But you never told me, I said loudly. My father looked at me. What did I never tell you? You never told me you met Danny in the library. You never told me you were giving him books to read. My father looked from me to Danny, then back to me. Ah, he said, smiling. I see you know about Danny in the library. I told him, Danny said. He'd begun to relax a bit, and the look of surprise was gone from his face now. And why should I tell you? My father asked. A boy asks me for books to read. What is there to tell? But all this week, even after the accident, you never said a word. I did not think it was for me to tell, my father said quietly. A boy comes into the library, climbs to the third floor, the room with old journals, looks carefully around, finds a table behind the bookcase where almost no one can see him, and sits down to read. Some days I am there, and he comes over to me, apologizes for interrupting me in my work, and asks me if I can recommend a book for him to read. He does not know me, and I do not know him. I ask him if he is interested in literature or science, and he tells me he is interested in anything that is worthwhile. I suggest a book, and 2 hours later he returns, thanks me, and tells me he has finished reading it. Is there anything else I can recommend? I'm a little astonished, and we sit for a while and discuss the book, and I see he has not only read it and understood it, but has memorized it. So I give him another book to read, one that is a little bit more difficult, and the same thing occurs. He finishes it completely, returns to me, and we sit and discuss it. Once I ask him his name, but I see he becomes very nervous, and I go to another topic quickly. Then I ask the librarian, and I understand everything, because I have already heard of Reb Saunders' son from other people. He is very interested in psychology, he tells me, so I recommend more books. It is now almost 2 months that I have been making such recommendations. Isn't that so, Danny? Do you really think, Reuven, I should have told you? It was for Danny to tell if he wished, not for me. My father coughed a little and wiped his lips with the handkerchief. The 3 of us stood there for a moment, not saying anything. Danny had his hands in his pockets and was looking down at the floor. I was still trying to get over my surprise. I'm very grateful to you, Mr. Malter, Danny said, for everything. There is nothing to be grateful for, Danny, my father told him. You asked me for some books, and I made recommendations. Soon you will be able to read on your own and not need anyone to make recommendations. If you continue to come to the library, I will show you how to use a bibliography. I'll come, Danny said. Of course I'll come. I am happy to hear that, my father told him, smiling. I think I better go now. It's very late. I hope the examination goes all right tomorrow, Reuven. I nodded. I'll come over to your house Saturday afternoon. Where do you live? I told him. Maybe we can go out for a walk, he suggested. I'd like that, I said eagerly. I'll see you then on Saturday. Goodbye, Mr. Malter. Goodbye, Danny. He went slowly up the hall. We watched him stop at the elevator and wait. Then the elevator came, and he was gone. My father coughed into his handkerchief. I am very tired, he said. I had to rush to get here. Faculty meetings always take too long. When you are a professor in a university, you must persuade your colleagues not to have long faculty meetings. I must sit down. We sat down on the bench near the window. It was almost dark outside, and I could barely make out the people on the sidewalk below. So, my father said, how are you feeling? I'm all right, Abba. I'm a little bored. Tomorrow you will come home. Dr. Schneidman will examine you at 10 o'clock, and I will come to pick you up at 1. If he could examine you earlier, I would pick you up earlier, but he has an operation in the early morning, and I must teach a class at 11, so I will be here at 1. Abba, I just can't get over that you've known Danny for so long. I can't get over him being the son of Reb Saunders. Danny cannot get over it either, my father said quietly. I don't... My father shook his head and waved my unasked questions away with his hand. He coughed again and took a deep breath. We sat for a while in silence. Billy's father came out of the ward. He walked slowly and heavily. I saw him go into the elevator. My father took another deep breath and got to his feet. Reuven, I must go home and go to bed. I'm very tired. I was up almost all last night finishing the article, and now rushing here to see you after the faculty meeting. Too much, too much. Come with me to the elevator. We walked up the hall and stood in front of the double doors of the elevator. We will talk over the Shabbat table, my father said. He had almost no voice left. It has been some day for you. Yes, Abba. The elevator came, and the doors opened. There were people inside. My father went in, turned, and faced me. My 2 baseball players, he said, and smiled. The doors closed on his smile. I went back up the hall to the eye ward. I was feeling very tired, and I kept seeing and hearing Danny and my father talking about what had been going on between them in the library. When I got to my bed, I saw that not only was the curtain still around Mr. Savo's bed, there was now a curtain around Billy's bed, too. I went up to the glass-enclosed section under the blue light where 2 nurses were sitting, and asked what had happened to Billy. He's asleep, one of the nurses said. Is he all right? Of course. He is getting a good night's sleep. You should be in bed now, young man, the other nurse said. I went back up the aisle and got into my bed. The ward was quiet. After a while, I fell asleep. The windows were bright with sunlight. I lay in the bed a while, staring at the windows. Then I remembered it was Friday, and I sat up quickly. I heard someone say, "Good to see you again, Bobby boy. How've you been?" And I turned, and there was Mr. Savo, lying on his pillow, the curtain no longer drawn around his bed. His long, stubbled face looked pale, and he wore a thick bandage over his right eye in place of the black patch. But he was grinning at me broadly, and I saw him wink his left eye. "Had a bad night, kid. Comes from playing ball. Never could see anything in chasing the ball around." "It's wonderful to see you again, Mr. Savo." "Yeah, kid. Been quite a trip. Gave the doc a real scare." "You had Billy and me worried too, Mr. Savo." I turned to look at Billy. I saw the curtain had been pulled back from his bed. Billy was gone. "Took him out about 2 hours ago, kid. Big day for him. Good little kid. Lots of guts. Got to give him that 3-rounder one day." I stared at Billy's empty bed. "I got to take it real easy, kid. Can't do too much talking. Have the old ring post down on my back." He closed his eye and lay still. When I prayed that morning, it was all for Billy, every word. I kept seeing his face and vacant eyes. I didn't eat much breakfast. Soon it was 10 o'clock, and Mrs. Carpenter came to get me. Mr. Savo lay very still in his bed, his eye closed. The examination room was down the hall, a few doors away from the elevator. Its walls and ceiling were white. Its floor was covered with squares of light and dark brown tile. There was a black leather chair over against one of the walls, and instrument cabinets everywhere. A white examination table stood to the left of the chair. Attached to the floor at the right of the chair was a large, stubby-looking metal rod with a horizontal metal arm. Some kind of optical instrument formed part of the end of this metal arm. Dr. Sneidman was in the room, waiting for me. He looked tired. He smiled, but didn't say anything. Mrs. Carpenter motioned me onto the examination table. Dr. Sneidman came over and began to take the bandage off. I looked up at him out of my right eye. His hands worked very fast, and I could see the hairs on his fingers. "Now, son, listen to me," Dr. Sneidman said. "Your eye has been closed inside the bandage all the time. When the last bandage comes off, you may open it. We'll dim the light in here so it won't hurt you." I was nervous, and I could feel myself sweating. "Yes, sir," I said. Mrs. Carpenter turned off some of the lights, and I felt the bandage come off my eye. I felt it before I knew it, because suddenly the eye was cold from the air. "Now, open your eyes slowly until you become accustomed to the light," Dr. Sneidman said. I did as he told me, and in a little while I was able to keep it open without difficulty. I could see now through both my eyes. "We can have the lights now, nurse," Dr. Sneidman said. I blinked as the new lights came on. "Now we'll have a look," Dr. Sneidman said, and bent down and peered at the eye through an instrument. After a while he told me to close the eye, and he pressed down on the lid with one of his fingers. "Does that hurt?" he asked. "No, sir." "Let's have you on that chair now," he said. I sat on the chair, and he looked at the eye through the instrument attached to the metal rod. Finally he straightened, swung the instrument back, and gave me a tired smile. "Nurse, this young man can go home. I want to see him in my office in 10 days. "Yes, doctor," Mrs. Carpenter said. Dr. Sneidman looked at me. "Your father tells me you know about the scar tissue." "Yes, sir." "Well, I think you're going to be all right. I'm not absolutely certain, you understand, so I want to see you again in my office, but I think you'll be fine." I was so happy I felt myself begin to cry. "You're a very lucky young man. Go home, and for heaven's sake, keep your head away from baseballs." "Yes, sir. Thank you very much. You're quite welcome." Outside in the hall, Mrs. Carpenter said, "We'll call your father right away. Isn't that wonderful news?" "Yes, ma'am." "You're lucky, you know. Dr. Sneidman is a great surgeon." "I'm very grateful to him," I said. "Ma'am?" "Yes?" "Is Billy's operation over yet?" Mrs. Carpenter looked at me. "Why, yes, of course. It was Dr. Sneidman who operated." "Is he all right?" "We hope for the best, young man. We always hope for the best. Come, we must call your father and get you ready to leave." Mr. Savo was waiting for me. "How'd it go, boy?" he asked. "Dr. Sneidman says he thinks I'll be fine. I'm going home." Mr. Savo grinned. "That's the way to do it, boy. Can't make a career out of lying around in hospitals." "Are you going home soon, Mr. Savo?" "Sure, kid. Maybe in a couple of days or so, if I don't go catching any more balls from little Mickey." "Dr. Sneidman operated on Billy," I said. "Figured as much. Good man, the doc. Got a big heart. I hope Billy's all right." "He'll be okay, kid. The important thing is you're getting out." An orderly came over with my clothes, and I began to dress. I was very nervous, and my knees felt weak. After a while I stood there, wearing the same clothes I had worn on Sunday for the ball game. It's been some week, I thought. I sat on my bed talking with Mr. Savo, and couldn't eat any of my lunch. I was nervous and impatient for my father to come. Mr. Savo told me to relax. I was spoiling his lunch. I sat there and waited. Finally I saw my father coming quickly up the aisle, and I jumped to my feet. His face was beaming, and his eyes were misty. He kissed me on the forehead. "So," he said, "the baseball player is ready to come home. Did you hear what Dr. Sneidman said, Abba?" "The nurse told me on the telephone." "Thank God." "Can we go home now, Abba?" "Of course. We will go home and have a wonderful Shabbat. I will take your things from the table." I looked at Mr. Savo, who was sitting up on his bed, grinning at us. "It was wonderful meeting you, Mr. Savo." "Likewise, kid. Keep the old beanbag away from those baseballs. I hope your eye gets better soon." "The eye's out, kid. They had to take it out. It was some clop. Didn't want the little blind kid to know, so I kept quiet." "I'm awfully sorry to hear that, Mr. Savo." "Sure, kid, sure. That's the breaks. Should have been a priest. Lousy racket, boxing. Glad to be out of it. Would have been in the war if that guy hadn't clopped me in the head like that years back. Busted up something inside. That's the breaks. Goodbye, Mr. Savo. Goodbye, kid. Good luck." I went out of the ward with my father, and out of the hospital. Book 2. Silence is good everywhere, except in connection with Torah, the Zohar. Chapter 5. We took a cab, and on the way home my father handed me my other pair of glasses with a warning not to read until Dr. Sneidman told me I could, and I put them on. The world jumped into focus, and everything looked suddenly bright and fresh and clean, as it does on an early morning with the sun on the trees, and there was newness everywhere, a feeling that I had been away a long time in a dark place, and was now returning home to sunlight. We lived on the first floor of a 3-story brownstone house that stood on a quiet street just off busy Lee Avenue. The brownstone row houses lined both sides of the street, and long, wide stone stairways led from the sidewalks to the frosted glass double doors of the entrances. Tall sycamores stood in front of the houses, and their leaves threw cool shadows onto the paved ground. There was a gentle breeze, and I could hear the leaves moving over my head. In front of each house was a tiny lawn planted with either morning glories or a hydrangea bush. The hydrangea bush, or snowball bush as we called it, on our lawn glowed in the sunlight, and I stared at it. I'd never really paid any attention to it before. Now it seemed suddenly luminous and alive. We climbed up the wide stone staircase and came through the vestibule into the long hallway, where it was dark and cool, and narrow like the corridors of a railroad car. The door to our apartment was at the end of the hallway, below and to the right of the staircase that led to the 2 stories above us. My father put his key into the lock, and we stepped inside. I could smell the chicken soup immediately, and I had only taken 2 or 3 steps when Manya, our Russian housekeeper, came running out of the kitchen in a long apron, her man-sized shoes, and with strands of dark hair falling across her forehead from the braided bun on the top of her head, scooped me into her huge arms as though I were a leaf, and smothered me with a hug that pushed the air from my lungs and left me breathless. She planted a wet kiss on my forehead, then held me at arm's length and began to babble in Ukrainian. I couldn't understand what she was saying, but I could see her eyes were moist and she was biting her lips to keep from crying. She released me, and I stood there, smiling and catching my breath, while my father talked to her. "Are you hungry, Reuven?" my father asked me. "I'm starved," I said. "There is lunch on the table. We will eat together. Then you can lie on the porch and rest while I finish typing my article." Lunch turned out to be a massive affair, with a thick soup, fresh rye bread, onion rolls, bagels, cream cheese, scrambled eggs, smoked salmon, and chocolate pudding. My father and I ate without talking, while Manya hovered over us like a protective bear, and afterwards my father went into his study, and I walked slowly through the apartment. I had lived in it all my life, but I had never really saw it until I went through it that Friday afternoon. I came out of the kitchen and stood for a moment staring down at the strip of gray carpet that ran the length of the hall. I turned left and walked slowly along the hall, past the bathroom and the dumbwaiter to my left, past the telephone stand and the pictures of Herzl, Bialik, and Chaim Weizmann that hung from the wall on my right, and into my bedroom. It was a long, somewhat narrow room, with a bed against its right wall, a bookcase along its left wall, 2 closets near the door, and a desk and a chair set a bit away from the wall facing the door. To the left of the desk, along the bookcase wall, was a window that looked out onto the alleyway and backyard beyond. The room had been cleaned, the bed carefully made and covered with its green and brown spread, and on the desk were my school books arranged in a neat pile. Someone had brought them home for me after the ball game, and there they were on the desk, as though I had never been away. I went over to the window and stared out at the alleyway. I could see a cat lying in the shade of our wall, and beyond was the grass of our back lawn, and the ailanthus tree with the sun on its leaves. I turned, sat down on the window seat, and stared at the New York Times war maps I had put on the wall over my bed. There were the maps of North African, Sicilian, and Italian campaigns, and now I would have to add a map of Europe, too. Over the maps was the large picture of Franklin Delano Roosevelt I had cut out of a New York Times Sunday magazine section, and next to it was the picture of Albert Einstein I had taken years ago from an issue of Junior Scholastic. I looked at my desk. My pens and pencils were neatly tucked into a holder alongside my lamp, and on top of a pile of papers was the recent issue of the WQXR Bulletin. I remembered I had wanted to listen to a Tchaikovsky symphony on Sunday night, the night of the ball game, which I had been so certain we would win. At the head of the bed was the door that led to my father's study. The door was closed, and I could hear my father working at his typewriter inside. There was no way to get to the living room except through the study, and I walked around behind my desk, opened the door, stepped inside, and closed it quietly behind me. My father's study was the same size as my room, but it had no windows. The wall alongside the door was lined with floor-to-ceiling bookcases. Along the opposite wall were curtained French doors, bounded by 2 large Ionic columns. What was left of that wall was also covered with bookcases, as was the wall adjoining it to the right. My father's desk stood near the outside wall of the house, in almost the exact position where I had asked to have my own desk placed. But it was a good deal larger than mine, with dark polished wood, deep drawers, and a large green leather-bordered blotter that covered almost its entire top. It was strewn with papers now, and my father was working intently over his old Underwood typewriter. The study was the darkest room in the apartment because it had no windows, and my father always worked with the desk lamp on, the yellow light bathing the desk and the floor around it. He sat there now, wearing his small black skullcap and pecking at the typewriter with his index fingers, a thin, frail man in his 50s, with gray hair, gaunt cheeks, and spectacles. I looked at him and suddenly realized that he hadn't coughed once since he had come to take me from the hospital. He glanced up at me for a moment, frowned, then went back to his work. He didn't like me to disturb him while he was at his desk, and I went quietly through the study, walking on the gray rug that covered the floor, then through the French doors into the living room. Sunlight poured through the 3 wide windows that faced the street, and spread gold across the gray rug, the French-style sofa, chairs, and end tables, the polished glass-topped coffee table, and along the white walls. I stood near the sofa for a moment, blinking my eyes, which always hurt a little whenever I came from the darkness of my father's study into the brightness of our living room. The windows were open, and I could hear children playing in the street. A warm breeze came into the room and lifted the lace curtains that fronted the windows. I stood in that room for a long time, watching the sunlight and listening to the sounds on the street outside. I stood there, tasting the room and the sunlight and the sounds, and thinking of the long hospital ward, with its wide aisle and its 2 rows of beds, and little Mickey bouncing a ball and trying to find someone who would play catch with him. I wondered if little Mickey had ever seen sunlight come through the windows of a front-room apartment. I turned finally and went back through the apartment and through the door that led from my father's bedroom onto our wooden back porch. I sat on the lounge chair in the shade that covered the porch and looked out at the back lawn. Somehow, everything had changed. I had spent 5 days in a hospital, and the world around seemed sharpened now and pulsing with life. I lay back and put the palms of my hands under my head. I thought of the baseball game, and I asked myself, was it only last Sunday that it happened? Only 5 days ago? I felt I had crossed into another world, that little pieces of my old self had been left behind on the black asphalt floor of the schoolyard, alongside the shattered lens of my glasses. I could hear the shouts of children on the street and the sounds of my father's typewriter. I remembered that tomorrow Danny would be over to see me. I lay very still on the lounge chair and thought a long time about Danny. Chapter 6. That night, as we sat at the kitchen table, with the Shabbat meal over and Manya gone until the morning, my father answered some of my questions about Danny Saunders. It was a warm night, and the window between the stove and the sink was open. A breeze blew into the kitchen, stirring the ruffled curtains and carrying with it the odors of grass and flowers and orange blossoms. We sat at the table dressed in our Shabbat clothes, my father sipping his second glass of tea, both of us a little tired and sleepy from the heavy meal. There was color now in my father's face, and his cough had disappeared. I watched him sip his tea and listened to the soft rustling of the curtains as they moved in the breeze. Manya had done the dishes quickly after we had chanted the grace after meals, and now we sat alone, embraced by the warm June night, the memories of the past week, and the gentle silences of the Shabbat. It was then that I asked my father about Danny. He was holding his glass of tea in his hands, the bottom of the glass resting upon his left palm, the body of the glass encircled by his right hand, and he put the glass on the white cloth that covered the table, looked at me, and smiled. He sat silent for a while, and I knew his answer would take a long time. Whenever he did not respond immediately to one of my questions, the answer was always a lengthy one. I could see he was arranging it in his mind, so that it would be carefully organized. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, and the words came out slowly. He told me he would have to go back a long time into the history of our people in order for me to understand his answer. He asked if I had the patience to sit and listen quietly. I nodded. He sat back in his chair and began to speak. I knew enough Jewish history, he said, not to make him have to start at the beginning. He would start instead with the history I had not yet learned in school, with the centuries of horror our people had experienced in Poland. Because it was really in Poland, or more accurately, in the Slavic countries of Eastern Europe, that Danny's soul had been born. Poland was different from the other countries of Europe, Reuben. Poland actually encouraged the Jews to come and live and be a part of her people. This was in the 13th century, during a time when the Jews of Western Europe, especially in Germany, were going through terrible persecutions. Jews had been living in Poland before this century, but they were not a very large community. Why did Poland want Jews when almost every other country was persecuting them? Because Poland was a very poor country, with a bankrupt aristocracy and a crushed peasantry. Her upper-class nobles would not engage in work, and instead managed to survive by what they could squeeze out of the labor of the serfs. Poland wanted people who would build her economy, organize her affairs, and bring her to life. Jews had a reputation for possessing these abilities, and so the Polish nobles were eager to have Jews settle in their country. They came by the thousands, from Western Europe, especially from Germany. They ran the nobles' estates, collected the taxes, developed Polish industry, and stimulated her trade. Poland became a kind of Jewish utopia. But the Jews did not only prosper economically, they also built many great academies of learning throughout the country. Every community had its Talmudic scholars, and by the end of the 16th century, the Jewish academies in Poland had become centers of learning for all of European Jewry. And then, Reuven, a great tragedy occurred. It is a tragedy that happens often to anyone who acts as a buffer. The Jews were helping the nobility, but in doing so, in collecting taxes from the serfs and peasants, for example, they were building up against themselves the hatred of these oppressed classes. And the hatred finally exploded into violence. In the borderland east of Ukraine in Russia, there was a community of Cossacks who were members of the Greek Orthodox Church. This community belonged to Poland, and the Polish nobles, who were Catholics, treated the Cossacks who lived there with cruelty and contempt. They not only taxed the lands and the cattle of the Cossacks, but also their churches and religious customs. And who collected these taxes? The Jews. Who had possession of the keys to the Cossack churches? The Jews. Who did the Cossacks need to go to if they wanted to open their churches for a christening service or for a marriage or a funeral? The Jews. All of whom were acting in behalf of the Polish lords. Nothing happened for a long time, because the Cossacks, like the Polish peasants, were afraid of the Polish nobles. But in the year 1648, a man named Bogdan Khmelnytsky became the leader of the Cossacks, and he led an uprising against Poland. The Jews became the victims of the Polish peasants who hated them, and of the Cossacks who also hated them. The revolution lasted 10 years, and in that time something like 700 Jewish communities were destroyed, and about 100,000 Jews were slain. When the horror was over, the great Jewish community of Poland had been almost completely destroyed. My father paused for a long moment. The window curtains moved softly in the cool night breeze. When he spoke again, his voice was low, tense, subdued. Reuven, what could our people say to God during the Khmelnytsky uprising? They could not thank him for the slaughter going on before their eyes, and they would not deny his existence. So many of them began to believe the Messiah was coming. Remember, Reuven, that those Jews who believe in the Messiah believe also that just before the Messiah comes, there will be an era of great disaster. At the moment when there seems to be no meaning in life, at that moment, a person must try to find new meaning. And so thousands upon thousands of Jews in both Eastern and Western Europe began to look upon the Khmelnytsky disaster as the prelude to the coming of the Messiah. They prayed and fasted and did penance, all in an effort to hasten his coming. And he came. His name was Shabbatai Z. He revealed himself about the same time as the massacres began. More than half the Jewish world became his followers. Years later, when it turned out that he was a fraud, you can imagine what the effect was. The Khmelnytsky uprising was a physical disaster. The false Messiah was a spiritual disaster. We are like other people, Reuven. We do not survive disaster merely by appealing to invisible powers. We are as easily degraded as any other people. That is what happened to Polish Jewry. By the 18th century, it had become a degraded people. Jewish scholarship was dead. In its place came empty discussions about matters that had no practical connection with the desperate needs of the masses of Jews. Pilpul, these discussions were called, empty, nonsensical arguments over minute points of the Talmud that have no relation at all to the world. Jewish scholars became interested in showing other Jewish scholars how much they knew, how many texts they could manipulate. They were not in the least bit interested in teaching the masses of Jews, in communicating their knowledge and uplifting the people. And so there grew up a great wall between the scholars and the people. It was also a time of terrible superstition. Our people believed that there were demons and ghosts everywhere that tortured the Jew, racked his body, and terrorized his soul. These fears affected all Jews, but they affected the unlearned masses worst of all. At least the scholar had his pilpul to keep him alive. Now, Reuven, if everywhere around you there are forces that wish to harm you, what is it that you can do to help yourself? Of course, you try to destroy these forces. But the masses of Jews did not believe they had the power to do this. Only very skillful people possessed such power, they felt. And so there came upon the scene Jews who claimed to be experts in the chasing away of demons and spirits. Such men were looked upon as saints, and they became very popular in Poland. They claimed that their power came from their ability to manipulate the various letters that spelled out the mystical names of God. That is why they were called Baalei Shem, masters of the name. To drive away evil spirits, they wrote magical amulets and prescribed medicines, performed wild dances, wearing the talit and tefillin over their white robes. They used black candles, sounded the shofar, recited psalms, screamed, pleaded, threatened, anything to drive the evil spirits out of a person who, for example, might be ill, or away from a mother who was about to have a child. To such a level had our people sunk in Poland by the 18th century. And here, Reuven, is where my answer to your questions about Reb Saunders' son really begins. My father paused for a moment and finished his tea. Then he looked at me and smiled. Are you tired yet, Reuven? No, Abba. I'm not sounding too much like a schoolteacher. I don't mind it when you sound like a schoolteacher, I said. It is not a lecture, he said. I will not ask you questions afterward. I want you to go on, I said. He nodded and smiled again. I will want some more tea, he said, but a little later. Now let me tell you about a man who was born in that century, and I think you will begin to have your answer. There are many legends about his birth, but I am not interested in telling you legends. He was born about the year 1700 in Poland. His name was Israel. His parents were very poor and not learned, and they both died while he was still a child. The people of his village cared for him and sent him to school, but he did not like school, and whenever he could, he would sneak away and escape to the woods, where he would walk under the trees, look at the flowers, sit by a brook, listen to the songs of the birds and to the noise of the wind in the leaves. As often as his teachers brought him back, so often did he run away to these woods, and after a while they gave up and left him alone. When he was 13, he became an assistant to a schoolmaster, but instead of helping the master teach the little children, he often took them also to the woods, where they would sing or stand in silence, listening to the birds in the trees. When he grew older, he became the beadle of the village synagogue. All day long he would sit around listening to the learned discussions that went on inside the synagogue walls, and at night, when everyone else slept, he would take the holy books in his hands and study them carefully. But it was not the Talmud that he studied. It was the Kabbalah, the books of Jewish mysticism. The rabbis had forbidden the study of the Kabbalah, and so Israel had to study in secret. He married finally, but almost nothing is known about his wife. She died soon afterward, and Israel, a full-grown man now, became a school teacher. He had a wonderful way with children, and he achieved a great reputation as a teacher. He was a kind and gentle person, honest and unaffected, and often people would come to him and ask him to settle their quarrels.